Start again. I seek leave to move amendments 1 through to 6 circulated in my name together.
I call the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Leave is call to the member for North Sydney.
I move amendments 1 to 6 as circulated in my name together. The amendments I'm moving today to the Safeguard Mechanism Crediting Amendment Bill do two things to address some of the shortfalls in the bill. Whilst I'm grateful for the engagement with the Minister and his staff to improve this bill, I need to be really clear. In its current form, the Safeguard Mechanism Bill continues to leave my community unconvinced that this government is truly prepared to do what we must to rapidly transition our economy. This bill is not bold enough as it leaves this House. It is not ambitious enough. And while this House has been given assurances that positive changes will be made in the Senate, that leaves us here with no clear line of sight on the final shape of this legislation when it returns to the House from the other place. Never has a government had such a clear mandate to take faster action on climate. And the truth is, this government and this parliament can reshape our country's future, but it must be prepared to do that in both houses of parliament. To do that, we must be prepared to lead ambitiously and bravely and break a cycle that has seen many climate and energy decisions over the past 3 decades made just on the basis of legislating for the term rather than fundamentally investing in and shifting our economy. The amendments I'm moving today do two things to drive climate ambition. Firstly, I will move to prevent new or expanding fossil fuel projects from accessing government funding to pursue abatement. And secondly, I'll move to bring more polluters into the mechanism over time. On my proposal for the amendment to the Powering the Regions Fund, the government has announced it will support the decarbonisation of existing industries and create a new clean energy industries through the $1.9 billion Powering the Regions Fund. While there are many examples of industries that will undoubtedly need this support and are much wanted in our economy, including things like green cement and green steel, there are also emission-intensive, trade-exposed facilities that will arguably be less desirable in our future economy, including many fossil fuel extraction projects. The Safeguard transformation stream within the Powering the Regions Fund should explicitly state that it is not available to new fossil fuel projects or expansion of existing licences, with this legislation instead doing everything it can to ensure these projects all find their way to net zero as soon as possible. Secondly, then, to my amendments on expanding the coverage of the scheme, I note that whilst there has been a lot of discussion around overall emissions reduction targets, the pathway to achieving net zero goal remains unarticulated. To address this, and in line with previous recommendations by the Climate Change Authority, I propose the government legislates to progressively lower the coverage threshold for the safeguard mechanism from the current 100,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions down to 25,000 tonnes. The ratcheting down over time would send a strong investment signal and set a clear trajectory to net zero for industry. Working alongside the reduction in the threshold, the bill should also incentivise a broader section of the industry to reduce their direct emissions by allowing them to opt into the scheme and thus opt into generating safeguard mechanism credits. This opt-in stream would have the dual benefit of increasing the number of polluters who will reduce their pollution, whilst also increasing the supply of SMCs, so those in the harder-to-abate sectors will have access to a larger number of high-quality SMCs from within the safeguard mechanism. Then, to enhance the anti-avoidance measures outlined by the Minister, the bill should be amended to stipulate facilities which are covered by the mechanism at the commencement of the Act will remain covered even if they reduce their emissions below 10,000 tonnes. Together, these measures would ensure genuine emissions abatement and reduction by the broadest section of large emitters. Mr Speaker, the fact remains that as legislation moves through this House, we need to be assured that when it returns, it will come into a form that we can stand and say we proudly represented our community's voice in the creation of it. I am very mindful that as this legislation leaves the House of Reps, my community's ambitions are not being met, and that puts me in a very difficult situation. I am grateful for the engagement with the Minister and his team, but the reality is this legislation could be stronger. And I urge this government to ensure any piece of legislation that leaves this House is always as strong as it can possibly be before it even gets to the Senate, rather than asking us in this House to continue to rely on amendments being moved in the Senate that we have no line of sight or control over. Thank you.